Hey, thanks for joining. This is the Tears of Fire podcast, a podcast where I go over The Last Dragon Chronicles by Chris DeLacy. Today, we're going to be going over chapters 41 through 44 of Firestar. I hope you had a safe flight in and hit no turbulence. With that, let's get into the show. In the last episode, we left off with Liz and David still having a conversation about Arthur. Liz was pretty upset, laying in bed right after she'd bumped her head. And so we're going to be jumping right back into the middle of that in chapter 41, The Birth of Lucy. Liz goes on to explain that Gwilana found her through the Umma she was projecting out into the universe. That Liz had wanted a child, maybe not the way that it happened, but she had wanted one, and she had started her brooding process. When she started molding her dragon figures before she knew the killing process, she started creating eggs, and eggs with dragons starting to crawl out of. This made David think back about the time when Xana came over and quickened that egg. He asked Liz if that's what happened. She confirmed, and that Arthur hadn't really done anything. He was a very sweet man, never pushed her on boundaries, and when Gwilana found her, she was only a couple weeks away from Lucy being here. Gwilana came and showed up the same way that she did with Xana, saying that you're about to have a child, and I'm needed. Gwilana then goes on to explain to Liz that Arthur cannot be around, period. He's never going to be able to understand what their family are or has to go through, and that he's not suited for Liz. So when he's out on a conference for work, they start the process, and Liz is going to be out of commission for a few weeks. When Arthur gets back, he visits a few times a day, but Gwilana keeps saying that Liz is ill and can't see him. Until one day it just becomes too much when he comes over with an engagement ring asking to see Liz. Gwilana then goes on to explain that he'll never be good enough for her and that he needs to drop it. Liz then said that she heard Arthur yelling her name from outside the door, then breaking the door down, which is kind of a little bit aggressive, man. Like, I mean, it's probably your intuition telling you that there's something going on, but still, if you got a family member saying that she can't be seen right now and then you break down the door, I don't see anywhere where that's going to really end up good. But he breaks down the door, shoots up the stairs to find Liz holding Lucy at that point, which was probably like a week old. And I could only imagine myself how I'd feel if I'd been seeing this girl and then I'd show up one day just from being at a conference and she's got some unknown child that looks almost exactly like her in her arms. Whose child is that? I didn't know you were pregnant. How do we not know you're pregnant? She didn't show any signs. I mean, of course, we know it's from the egg, but I'm sure Arthur would have had several questions. But we don't get really anything from Arthur besides him feeling a little betrayed. He drops the ring that he had brought to ask Liz to marry him with and just walks out. Liz says that that's the last time she'd seen him. So Gwilana's just kind of been a hoe to begin with, man. I don't know what Gwilana actually does besides just keep Liz under. I'm sure if Gwilana ever wanted to teach Liz the entire process, she would no longer be needed. So that's one way for her to control Liz in the line of Guinevere, is by saying that she's needed to complete the process. But I feel like Liz doesn't need to be unconscious for like the last two that she had been. If she's just transferring some of her Umma, she's able to do that to the dragons with ice, fire. So that little bit just makes me think that's Gwilana trying to mastermind and just control everything going on around her, which, I mean, it is pretty much what they're saying, but without saying it. Okay, but that brings us to the end of that chapter. And so now we're going to be into chapter 42, The Long Days. And this was kind of a lengthy chapter. I had to go back and read it twice just to take some solid notes because I was getting pretty sucked into it. But it starts out with David just stressing about what's going on. He knows that the deadline is in just a couple months. They're at the beginning of November. And he gets a phone call. And he hears a familiar voice and he starts calling out for Xana. But the woman on the other line just starts getting a little upset, saying that that's sick and disgusting. It happened to be Becky, Xana's sister. She's going on to say, and all of Xana's family is under the belief that Xana, I mean, they're just told that Xana disappeared, but they're assuming that she's dead. So they had a whole memorial and service for her. And Becky's just pissed because David didn't even show. No showed, no call, no show. In a job, you get fired. As the ex-boyfriend of your dead sister, you probably never want to talk to that dude again. But so David starts to feel bad, and he gets another call, and so he's getting ready to be yelled at again by maybe Xana's mom or something. But it was actually his editor, Dillis. And she starts kind of not really hounding him, just asking him questions. It seemed like a decent interaction, but David, obviously, since he's stressed out with everything else and hasn't really written the story, makes some pretty bold moves in this conversation. She's asking him how the book is going and what his plans are with school because they haven't really had any communication for a while. And David says that he's dropping out of school. He doesn't need to do that, and he can focus on writing the book and do some more, what I would say is more directed research to whatever he's writing, instead of being in school where you have to go through with like gen eds and then you have to pick a specific major and then have to go and do classes with that. But maybe his writing takes him in different directions, and so he'd rather just basically study on his own what he needs to. And so he tells his editor this and promises that he's going to have the book done by the end of January. The editor claims that that's a pretty bold move, but agrees to it. And David gets off the phone with her, and Liz is pretty upset. Liz thinks that he shouldn't drop out. He's going to need an education and a degree, period. So just in case writing doesn't work out for whatever reason, but she's trying to be the voice of reason for David. And David doesn't really hold on to it or listen. He just says that he's not getting anything from school. He doesn't enjoy being there, and that he needs to focus on the coming conflict and writing his story because they go hand in hand. And David does feel like he's going to have a pretty big role. David has been spending a lot of time thinking, and he's unsure of what Arthur's role is in all of this. Liz says to not go after Arthur whatsoever and sends David to his room. After this, we get like a little time lapse. They do it in 2 sentences in the book, but in my brain, I see a little flashing montage because it says that David worked for most days since it was winter and cold, and he wrote over 40,000 words right before Christmas. And so I don't know how much Gadzooks was in there, but I was just seeing, montages of snowy days, the sun rising, the moon being up, foggy days, and David just, sleeping at the desk, typing real quick, passing out food in his hands. So, I was just picturing how I would set it up in a movie or TV show. But they are saying that Henry Bacon invites everyone over for Christmas dinner. They're actually doing it Christmas Eve. They're doing it on December 23rd. Because because Mr. Bacon's going to go and visit some of his other family for the actual holiday, right? I mean, sweet thing. He's a good neighbor. But so this kind of sends Liz into panic mode and makes her upset as well because obviously Lucy isn't there. She's not sure how to explain it, but so they just come up with, you know, what I would say is truth adjacent. That she's staying with Auntie Gwyneth, and she's going to be back the day that Bacon leaves on Christmas Eve, and then she leaves the day right before Bacon gets back. And so they'll just miss each other, which sucks for Bacon, man. He hasn't seen this kid in months, and so I don't know what he thinks, like if he's getting suspicious at that. But Lucy's not a very quiet person, especially in the first two books when they were dealing with the squirrels and the hedgehog and running in and out of Bacon's backyard. I wouldn't call her a disturbance, but she's definitely noticeable. And so I feel like the absence of an 11-year-old girl would be quite noticed, even if it was she was staying in her house. You know, you'd wonder if she was sick or something. Before going over, though, they're getting ready, and Gadzooks gives David the title to the story. They decide to name it Whitefire, and he's reminiscing with Henry's invitation to dinner. David kind of reminisces back on his time writing these past couple months and realizes that Henry's been a huge help because he's offered his personal library and has even gotten specialty books for David on whatever he would like to be reading about and researching for his. And he's just been a homie. He's had unfiltered access to it. When David gets over to Bacon's house, he sees that he's quite upset. Bacon doesn't make any sudden movements or say anything. He just looks at David with eyes that look like he'd been crying. He asked David if he knew about Xana, and David instantly felt guilty, didn't know what to say, and that he had just been wrapped up in writing the story and trying to push it off, that he forgot to tell Henry because he forgot how close they actually were. Bacon understands that and says that he only found out because her library card went inactive, which is so sad, man. I mean, obviously, since he's just friends with her through the library, he's not going to know the family or anything, but I'm sure Xana had talked about Bacon to her family because she's at the library so much, and he was that point of contact. They seem pretty close. So, I don't know. I guess thinking about it as a normal person, I'm not going to go tell the librarian that my sister passed. That's going to be the very last thought in my mind. So it makes sense, but interesting way for Bacon to find out, because he said as soon as he saw that, he started investigating it and asking questions, and eventually got to her disappearance. And so he asked what David knew about it, and David told him he couldn't tell him the truth, obviously, but just that he'd known about her disappearance for a couple weeks, and just what Bacon had told him, that polar bears were there and no body was found. During the dinner, Bacon gets up to go take a phone call real quick, and David sees a rift of space and time kind of near the carpet floor. And the wicker basket that Snigger was in was kind of flashing in and out of, space and time for a quick second, and David gets confused. Bacon had made a punch that says couldn't get a fly drunk, but David is explaining how Liz had one cup and couldn't stop giggling, and she's slurring her speech, and sounds like she got pretty intoxicated, had a good night, which, man, for Liz, it's got to be hard. I'm sure she's just feeling it rough with everything going on, and then to get drunk on top of that. I'm surprised she's not bawling, but David's trying to ask her questions about Snigger and the wicker basket because he remembers her saying she walked in on that scene once, or is right after Lucy's disappearance from Bacon's house, or kidnapping, I should say. She was taken by Gwilana. And David's asking what happened to Snigger. Did you remember letting him go? Where's the basket at? Liz is uncomprehendable. She's not understanding David, and David's not understanding her. So David kind of gives up on that and decides that he wants to go talk to some of the dragons, and maybe they have some more information. When he goes over next door, he wants to speak to Graith, and Gadzooks stops him. They have a quick interaction, and Gadzooks says that there's a force playing games with them. He was starting to get a message with the first three letters being FAR, and he knows it's not the word far. It's, something bigger, but they're not letting them get through. And Gadzooks believes that it's the Fane that's stopping with the dark matter, so to say. And then we get another little time jump after that. It's no action until February 11th, and David is stressing this whole time. It's getting really close. By this point, he's actually got his story done and completed. He's got over 300 pages just stacked on his computer or on his table that he's getting ready to mail out as well. Everything starts off pretty calm on February 11th. David is just sitting on the couch holding Bonington. It says that Bonington's been getting pretty sick and is on the verge of dying. He's been sleeping a lot, no longer really plays, that his energy is spent getting up to go eat and drink and then pretty much being asleep the rest of the time. Nothing really crazy happens, but everything gets silent and still in David's mind, and he hears a voice. It's the Fane contacting him, and he asks, "I am the Fane. Shall we commingle?" David has a thought that since he's already in his mind, he doesn't really have too much say on whether they do or not, so he consents to it, and they have a quick conversation. And the Fane tells David that he has a high vibration, and he's connected to Goddess more than just the dragons. The Fane also go on to explain that him and Arthur are one. I don't know what that means, because to me, we don't obviously know anything about Arthur's other descendants or relations. We haven't gotten any information on David and his family, because we know that the people that moved him into Liz's house was his friend, because his friend's dad had a big moving van. He had some company, I think it was like rodent removal, but he had a big moving van that could fit a lot of stuff. That's who he originally came with. There was like one or two mentions of David's parents in a letter, and so have they always been kind of in contact with the universe's energy and magic, and is he related to Arthur? Obviously, Arthur can't be his father because Liz knew Arthur about 11 years ago, and David's 20-something, so, David would be about 10 years old at the time, and Liz was saying that they were in their mid-20s, maybe early 20s, and so Arthur couldn't have had a kid then, because that would put him at 10 years old with having David. No, the math doesn't math there. He's not dad. We haven't had any mentions of uncles or cousins, so that could be something. That was my first thoughts. But even so, if they are one and connected with Goddess a little bit closer, does that mean that Arthur has the same abilities as David? Are they both writers? Can they write the future? Or does Arthur have something a little bit different? Does Arthur even know? The Fane explained to him that the dark matter has been influencing everything around him, and he's feeling a pressure in his head when all of a sudden a letter gets pushed through the little envelope hole in the door. I don't really know what that's called. Sorry. I'll have editing Diego pop in. So they run down and they grab it real quick, and the note says Farlow Island. Gadzooks is getting excited and saying that Farlow Island is the message that he had been getting but couldn't quite remember. David looks on a map and finds where it's at. It's a Scottish island, which instantly sent me to, is that Arthur? Because we know that he was from I thought they said Welsh, but I'm pretty sure Welsh and Scottish are pretty close. They might share some territories, or maybe they are the same. My bad if I'm being ignorant. I'll have to look into that. I'll have editing Diego pop in again. But so immediately thought Arthur, and this note was fascinating to Gretel and to Graith and Golly. They're all looking at it. The ink is written in some kind of green substance, and David is asking Gretel questions because she's been trying to get it the whole entire time, and has this kind of crazy look in her eye, super violet, not violent, violet. And David confirms with her. He says, "Is this dragon's blood?" And Gretel just nods expectantly. So David then puts two and two together. He turns to Liz, telling her that Arthur is connected and he needs to go talk to him. He needs to find him. He needs to go to the Scottish island, Farlow. David rushes out instantly without really saying anything. And that was the end of that chapter. So that brought just, quite a lot. I want to know how high of a vibration, how close to Goddeth is David, if he can manipulate dark matter just simply by writing. And it seems like maybe this writing utensil that's being used with dragon's blood, does that have some kind of power because it's dragon's blood? And whose dragon's blood is it? Did Arthur catch Grockle and he's sitting there and freaking poking him every time he needs to write something for blood? Like, that is crazy. That's torture and demented and evil, and I can't imagine that someone like Arthur, who seemed to revere dragons when he was with Liz, interact with them. I almost refuse to believe that. So if that's not what's going on, I'd like to know how he's getting this dragon's blood. If there has been no mention of Grockle, even on the news, David's pointing out. So it's just a lot going on. A lot going on. That also brings us to the end of part 2, and it starts into part 3 on the next chapter. Chapter 43, Farlow Abbey, 10 days earlier. My first note is perfect. I wanted to know what was going on here and kind of led to these events and how the letter came. And we start with an interaction between two Buddhists. There was Brother Hugo and Brother Vincent. I have come to my understanding that Brother Vincent is Arthur. Hugo asks him to come into their room and shuts the door, and the book explains that that's very big sign that something's not exactly right with the monks in that temple. In their beliefs, they believe in openness and transparency, so most of the time doors stay open. But Hugo is very solemn, very quiet, and he asks Brother Vincent if this piece of paper that they found in his praying spot the other night was his. And being calculated, Brother Vincent understands that he already knows the answer, so there's no point in lying. But he says yes, that it's his paper. And Hugo goes on to explain that they have no books or scrolls on the astrology that he's doing, and the math and equations have never before been seen, but somehow make everything connect just on this one note that they've been examining. And so Hugo gets kind of concerned and tells Brother Vincent that they don't believe in divination, that they can't be looking at the stars to tell the future. It's against their fundamentals and won't really bring them closer to God. Brother Vincent is begging and pleading to not be kicked out of the Brotherhood, but Hugo, and he never really gave me this feeling either, Hugo tells him not to worry, but he does ask him, he says, you spend a lot of time out at the Folly, which is what I'm gathering to be like a little tower that's out there to be a storage place or something on the other side of the island. And Brother Vincent goes on to explain that that's not where he writes, that's his place of meditation, where he goes for peace and to be able to just take in and meditate. but he writes in his cell, and he keeps all of his papers in his cell. So Brother Hugo says he should bring them to be examined, and depending on what's on them, they might have to be destroyed, but there are no intentions to kick Brother Vincent out at this time. After this conversation is ended, Hugo sends Brother Vincent to go gather the papers, and Brother Vincent gladly bows, happy that he's not being disfellowshipped, and goes to gather the papers. And while Brother Vincent is gone, Hugo tells Brother Bernard to go ahead and come out. And Brother Bernard is described as a man of bigger stature around the tummy. He's a little thick. And Hugo's having a conversation with him, telling him that he should follow Brother Vincent. And you can tell that Brother Bernard isn't completely comfortable with this. He thinks that it's kind of against their beliefs as well to be spying and not letting people go upon their lives as they choose. But Hugo tells him that he's worried about Brother Vincent because 11 years ago when he came to them, it was right after trying to take his own life after jumping off of a bridge. Which is like crazy, dude. I mean, I get being heartbroken over a woman and seeing her with a kid that you know nothing about and a crazy aunt. I mean, when you're saying it, it sounds, there's a lot going on. But to throw yourself from a bridge is, I mean, you went to some dark places, and I'm glad he found some place that he was able to find a purpose and a higher calling, and be able to, you know, rise above that. I wouldn't say necessarily healed, because we'll see later on he's still a little stuck. But after that conversation, Brother Bernard agrees to help Hugo in just kind of watching and monitoring Brother Vincent. And that brings us to the end of chapter 43. Chapter 44, In the Fields, next day. Brother Vincent is getting ready to go out on his trip to the Folly, where he's going to go meditate and, in my guess, write a little bit more. But he's followed out. He's called by Brother Bernard, asking him if he doesn't mind if he joins on this day. It's snowing out there, and they're having a little bit of weather. And Brother Vincent asks him if he's sure, but he wouldn't mind if he goes. He's trying to remember his manners, because Brother Bernard does say that he's got provisions. He pats his little knapsack, and he's got some bread, cheese, and a flask of water. Brother Vincent notices that Bernard is a little bit out of shape and asks him what his sudden interest in the Folly is. Brother Bernard takes a second, but points over by the Folly into the sky. And over there they see a raven. Well, at first, Brother Vincent thinks that it's a crow, and he's kind of mystified because this isn't an unusual bird. But Brother Bernard takes a second to correct him and says that it's a raven. It's got a more fan-shaped tail, and its beak is a little bit bigger and more round versus its smaller cousin. He said this is a big event because there's never been a raven on this island before. That ravens are more social birds and prefer to hang out in their pack, which is actually called a murder. And so he's curious as to if there's another one around here, since they're 8 miles away from anything across water. My first thought is, okay, is this Guilana? Is she keeping an eye on Arthur? So she must have obviously known that he had some kind of power and felt it when he was, getting around Liz, which makes me think maybe there has to be two people with powers of different kinds kind of coming together to do it. There was Arthur and Liz, who quickened Lucy, and then it was David and Xana, and they both had to be from different kinds, so David was obviously the connection to Goddeth, and then Guilana was the Sibyl, and earlier on, when it was Liz and Arthur, maybe Arthur was the Sibyl, and Liz was obviously that connection to Goddeth. So that was kind of crazy, but if Guilana's been watching Arthur this whole time, that's kind of crazy. For this dude to be Buddhist monk where he's very chilled out and not really doing much but respecting nature and trying to be enlightened. She couldn't have gotten a better deal because this guy who could have been a threat to her if he decided to do follow his natural abilities from what it seems he could have probably done some damage earlier on than 11 years later. But that was my first thought. Was this Guilana watching Arthur? Brother Bernard says that he's noticed the bird here for about a week, and it's been circling the folly at times, and asks if Brother Vincent has noticed it, and if there's a possibility of it being a pair, if there's a second bird somewhere. Brother Vincent goes on to say that when he's in the folly, it's his place of meditation, so he doesn't spend time with his eyes open that much, though he has love for nature and the God's creations of the earth. He is much trying to just enlighten himself. Brother Bernard talks about a study that was done on monkeys in early Japan, and how these groups of monkeys would find sweet potatoes for them on the beach, but they didn't really want to eat them because they were all sandy. Didn't like the crunch. Obviously, you can't really eat sand. It's gross. But they observed that these monkeys started washing the potatoes in the water before eating. And it took a while. It said that it was like about a generation's worth for monkeys, which I'm not sure how long that is. Like maybe 5 years, 10 years. A generation for us humans is 20. I'm sure for monkeys it's a little bit shorter since their lifespans are shorter. So I'm going to say like 5 years-ish. But these monkeys started washing them, and it was harder for the older monkeys to learn, but the younger ones caught on quickly. And once the 100th monkey washed the potato, they reached a point of critical mass, meaning there was more monkeys doing this than not doing it. And so the belief is that there was a group consciousness, and because there were so many monkeys doing this, the other monkeys that were across the island with no contact to this little group whatsoever, which I'm not sure how they were able to track that, but that's what they say. There was no contact between the two monkey groups. The monkeys on the other side of the island started doing the same thing. And so scientists came up with that theory of group consciousness. I had to look this up, and that's actually a legit study that happened in Japan. I think they were saying around 1952. So that's pretty cool. And I mean, I never knew that there was a study on it. I'll have to look more into it. But I've always wondered that about dragons themselves. Obviously, here just using logic based in reality, dragons are not real. We did have dragons. We did have dinosaurs, and we even had flying dinosaurs. But nobody was alive back then to see if any of them breathed fire, which there's been no proof of that whatsoever. But I know in earlier episodes I've said it a few times, isn't it strange how every ancient civilization that had no contact with each other, separated by thousands of years of time and oceans, bodies of waters, separating them, they all have depictions of their own dragons. Not all of them are the same. Some of them are wyverns that are 2 legs and crawl around on 2 wings. The Western dragon with 4 legs and 2 wings. The Chinese serpent dragon, Quetzalcoatl. There's so many different representations, but every ancient culture had one of their own. How did that happen? That's group consciousness, So I would love for dragons to be real. I think everybody does. The big main concern is how we never find any bones. Listen, if you're ever much of a hunter, here's one thing for you. You'll never find mountain lion bones. Everybody knows that there's mountain lions. You might call them something else. Cougars, pumas, they're all the same thing. But you're never going to find any bones of them out in the wild. Why? Because out in the wild, things absorb. It's like less than 3% of actual bones become fossils. And that's what we're able to dig up. There were so many dinosaurs and everything back then that have died and gone through millions of years of processing in order for us to dig them up and use them for our gasoline and, our plastics and all that shit. But in the Amazon, if you die and lay down, it takes 48 hours for the forest to consume you, to deteriorate your body and be left with nothing. And then wild animals will come around and take your bones and scatter them all across. So you might find a bone, but you're never going to know what that bone is from. And especially since most bones are all the same, spine is a spine, rib is a rib. Nowadays, we might have better technology to be able to identify what kind of rib it is. You just never know. And so who's to say that we're ever going to find a body of a dragon? Birds don't fossilize because their bones are so thin. If dragons were real, they would have to have bones similar to that so that they'd be able to fly. How they'd be so strong, who knows? But you just got to keep an open mind and hope. As they're heading up the folly, they get in there and they hear a little rustling noise, and Brother Bernard gets a little nervous and asks if there's rats. He's not a big fan of rodents, but Arthur, I just call him Arthur now, but Brother Vincent tells him that there's only one rodent here and there's no need to worry. He's a friend. He breaks off a little piece of cheese and this squirrel comes out, runs around, hops up his arm, runs the length of it, and then settles on his shoulder. Brother Bernard is in astonishment again because, like the raven, he's never seen a squirrel on this island, period. Especially not one that smiled. And that blew my mind because how did Snigger teleport all the way from Wayward Crescent, Massachusetts, halfway across the world, to a Scottish island? I mean, it did say that there was a rift of space and time in Henry's house, and Liz didn't remember what was going on, but this makes me wonder if whatever Arthur is writing, he was able to write Snigger over to him. But then that brings up more questions to me. How did he know about Snigger? Was he just writing about Liz? Does he know about Lucy? How much does this guy know? Does he know about his abilities? I mean, obviously not too much. He's just scribing something down. And he's not telling us what he's using to write. And then he covers up the ink with saying that it's alcohol mixed with some perfume. So he's covering up his tracks good, and DeLacy isn't really giving us too much information. So we'll just have to read on to next week. But now we're getting into it, and it's kind of cool. I'm recording this episode on February 1st. The deadline for this book is February 14th. So, I mean, next weekend or in 2 weekends, who knows, we might have it kind of timed out perfectly for it to be a Valentine's Day. If I can, I'll see if I can end it there. We're kind of towards the end, but still have like another 150 pages to go. So thank you guys so much. I would very much appreciate some input. I'm thinking about starting a Patreon here soon, but I don't want to do it without it being worth it for you guys. It'd be nothing crazy. There would be a free tier, a $1 tier, and maybe like a $2 or $3 tier just for the heck of it. And we can kind of see I have some ideas on bonus episodes that I would like to put behind there and do kind of an almost, I wouldn't say a cryptid podcast, but how dragons and other mythical creatures could be real and what our beliefs are on them for me and my guests that come on too. So if that's something that interests you, please hit me up on either, you can comment on Spotify, or you can email me at gadzooks, thelastdm@gmail.com, and tell me what you guys would like to hear. I would, only want to do that if that's something that you guys would be wanting to be invested in. So thank you guys. I hope you guys have a safe flight out and hit no turbulence.